This is Yvette Carnell with BreakingBrown.com and YourBlackWorld.net. And I'm joined by writer Pascal Robert today, and we're discussing Baltimore and the unrest in Baltimore. But right before this call, we learned that President Obama had came out and he made a statement on Baltimore, and he made a statement on I think he said that the actions in Baltimore were counterproductive, and that there were the actions of a few thugs in the streets were causing some problems, and he said his prayers were with the injured police officers. And I just want to, before I get into any deep, I just want to ask you, Pascal, what were your initial impressions? Because you called me and you were like, the president just said something about this. So what was your initial impression of what he had to say?
My initial impression was that his little speech, 15-minute speech, was divided into two parts. The first part was the law and order part, and the second part was we need a Marshall Plan for our cities part. The first part was what he's basically saying that, my condolences, the perfunctory, my condolences for the young man who was killed, young man Gray, who had his spine snapped by the police department and his throat crushed, savagely. I mean, this young man was killed like a deer, basically being killed by lions. And he said his condolences go out to them. But then he said that he's worried about the police officers who got injured, yada, yada, yada. And then he came to the point where he said that, these young people, these people who are out there, stealing are not protesting. When you go out, and you basically steal things from stores or from a CVS, you're not protesting, you're a thief. And when you're burning things down, you're an arsonist. The typical law and order response that you would expect, but again, being that he's the first black president, he cannot show too much sympathy for the position of people who are showing a rebellion. And let's understand something. I don't understand where in anyone's equation property damage is equal to having a young boy whose spine was snapped by the state-sponsored agents of Protect and Serve, being the police officers. To me, there's nothing that's going to bring that young man's life back. And I don't remember seeing the same amount of outrage in the media when this young boy was killed by the police officers as I'm seeing now, because property is being damaged. I think that demonstrates a certain kind of sickness that we're not as angry at as a young man being brutally. I mean, that's 70 to 80% of this young man's spine was severed. I cannot even imagine the degree of violence that has to be done to bring forth that kind of damage to a human being. So the next part of the president's speech, to answer your question, was when he was saying that, this police brutality is nothing new. As if that makes it any better, that this has been going on for years. And that this is a product of urban poverty and, dislocation in the cities. And the thing that was ironic to me is that you're talking about how we need to have jobs coming into the ghetto. At the same time, you're having a press conference about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a trade deal that's going to be exporting jobs to Asia. Once again, this is the Obama okey doke. I've talked about this before, where he proposes one thing that is seemingly good for black and brown communities, but actually is really the agenda is something that will neutralize any development in a positive way. So, what are your thoughts, Yvette?
Well, here's my first thought. My first thought was that the first thing that I heard that he said this is counterproductive. Well, here's the thing, and this goes back years. Black people in this country have been asking for parity for a long time. We've been asking for parity in schools. We've been asking for parity in terms of prosecution. We've been asking for parity of fairness in terms of incarceration, in terms of crack and powder cocaine. We've been asking for in terms of policing. These are things we've been asking for a long time. So if you're going to tell me that violence isn't productive, then I would like for somebody to tell me what is productive. What is the productive means? Because asking nicely and saying, please treat us fairly within the, we're citizens too. Wasn't it in the 60s when they were wearing these signs that said, I'm a man too. Black men were wearing these signs or whatever. I mean, if this isn't productive, then the leader of the free world needs to tell me what is productive. That was my first thought in terms of what he had to say and why it was problematic. I mean, what do you think about this whole analysis that anytime there's violence is not productive and violence should be shunned?
Well, I find it ironic for someone who's president of the United States to say violence is not productive when violence is what gave birth to this nation. Violence is what subsidized this nation when it was murdering Native Americans and took their land. Violence is what economically girded this country when it was basically enslaving black people. I mean, this country was born out of violence. Violence abroad, international violence in terms of imperialism, in terms of what we do by dropping drones on children in third world and developing countries in the Middle East. For him to talk about how violence produces nothing as president of the American empire is rather comical. I mean, we don't have the largest military in the developing world for no reason. If you don't believe in violence, then why do you have the largest military in the developing world? Of course America believes in violence. This is a typical double speak that you're going to get from the President of the United States. Violence serves nothing, but we dropping drones on Somalia. I mean, it's ridiculous. The bottom line, violence serves nothing for the powerless who threaten the status quo. That's what he's saying.
Well, and see, the thing is that stands out to me, right? It's almost as if violence is a part of white privilege, in the sense that white people are allowed to inflict violence upon other people, upon brown people or other white people, or whoever they deem necessary. But when black people turn to violence, it's automatically, no, you shouldn't do that. Because even when I noticed this, when after Nelson Mandela passed away, I noticed that a lot of the people on the right, especially, were calling. Was saying that Nelson Mandela led a group of killers and murderers. It was wrong to act out in the face of oppression like that. It's almost as if the powers that be are allowed to be violent, but when people in black community turn to violence as a last resort in terms of what they feel they need to do because they don't feel there are any other options available to them, or because this is just a conflagration of things that have happened, right? This is just a reaction. I mean, a lot of this isn't even strategy; it's just a reaction to oppression. So, do you believe that this that should be part of the conversation in terms of, because even when you look at violence in this country, violence has always been a part of most revolutions. People don't want to talk because violence is so bad. Well, the American Revolution was violent. The French Revolution, I mean, let's talk about the guillotine. That's always been a part of it. So why is it that when people in black community act out, we're immediately relegated and marginalized as thugs and hoodlums? Everybody wants to talk about the fact that somebody went into the store and stole some sodas and chips and all this sorts of stuff. But nobody wants to talk about the killings. Nobody wants to talk about what led to this in the first place.
Because the American mainstream media and otherwise, and intelligentsia have put forth the idea that black anger is illegitimate. What do you guys think? What are you complaining about now? What do you want? As if there's ever been a time when there was that parity we're talking about in terms of distribution of resources. While you guys got the New Deal, we got Jim Crow. While you guys got the Homestead Act, we got nothing. So, I mean, this idea that, there's ever been any kind of parity or there's ever been any kind of legitimate desire on the part of the American status quo or the institutions of this country to actually bring forth a position economically. For me, the most important thing is to root this in political economy. What is going on in Baltimore? What is going on in Ferguson? What is going on with Eric Gardner? What is going on with Trayvon Martin? This is about the fact that the political economy of the working class, working in the poor black community, is not functioning. And it's also a product of the fact that the black political class that we have put into power since the 45 or 50 years since the Voting Rights Act, I would argue has been an abysmal failure. We've had over 10,000 elected officials put in power since the Voting Rights Act. And where exactly is the condition of the black community now? We have cops mow down our young men and women like animals in the street weekly, like we're back in the 60s, and we're having riots like in 66, 65, 67. So this is the reality we're in right now. Black faces in high places like Obama, like Loretta Lynch, whose first order of business was to console the cops and make sure that they would be okay. Our new black female attorney general, her first order of business in terms of these men who are slaying our youth and black men and women on the state taxpayer dime, to say we need to console the police and make sure their morale is okay. Well, obviously their morale is fine if they feel they can get away with killing black people without any repercussions. So I think that the morale of the police in this equation is not exactly the most important agenda that should be on the new attorney general's table.
Well, the thing to keep in mind about Loretta Lynch is, and this is something that just blows my mind in terms of the contradiction. People forget that Loretta Lynch was a federal prosecutor in New York. You know, if you can't on the one hand say, oh my God, the NYPD is going rogue and call them thugs and say, why isn't the federal government doing something about this, without also acknowledging that Loretta Lynch was a federal prosecutor who was charged with doing something about these sort of excesses and did nothing about it while she was in New York.
She also had the full support of Rudolph Giuliani and the Police Chiefs Association nationally when she was up for nomination. I don't know what the Black Lives Matter movement was expecting from an attorney general who had the Police Chiefs Association nationally support their candidacy. To me, this is a woman who basically has demonstrated by the fact that she had Rudolph Giuliani, probably one of the most anti-Black elected officials in terms of behavior that we've seen in the last 30 years, combined with the police chiefs of America. If they're supporting her, then this is a woman, obviously, who's more law and order than she is sympathy with those black and brown faces that are being shot by cops.
Well, no, but she's always like, even if you look, the thing that's so bothersome, and it was so bothersome. I'm a fan of black institutions. I'm not a member of sorority, but I'm a fan of any black institution because I believe that they have benefits. But the problem was, you see, like the Deltas, I think it was, who came out in favor of Loretta Lynch and tried and pressured legislators to kind of put her in, to give her a vote and, give her her day. And the thing that bothered me is that we were back to square one, in the sense that what mattered most was the fact that Loretta Lynch was a black woman. Nobody went to her background and said, listen, this woman is a corporatist. She came out of Harvard and she worked at a firm that defended the very banks that disenfranchised black people, that ran scams on black people, that stripped black people of generational wealth. This is who she worked for. And she has never done anything on behalf of the little guy in her entire career. So I think this, in my mind, this is another misuse of our political capital on behalf of someone just because that person is black, not necessarily because that person will do what is best for the largest number of black people.
Well, this is an example of what I call the sham of symbolic policy, sham of what I call racial kinship politics. We talked about this before. The notion that just because someone is black, they have your political interest in mind. And we gave the example in one of our conversations about a guy who owns a chain of McDonald's, voted Democrat while his employment is worried about the labor rights and worrying about overtime and being able to get health care, while this guy who owns a chain of McDonald's clearly doesn't want those things because they cost him money. Yet they'll be supporting the same candidate because they both believe that, black skin aligns them in some way. And what has happened is that because we have an elite tier of African Americans who are doing better, the educated black elite, the talented 10, whatever you want to call it, the black leadership class, who all of these organizations, whether they be the NAACP, sororities, fraternities, the fraternal organizations, are part of, they have a worldview that's based on their class position. And their class position is based on the fact that they have been able to gain entree into the white power structure and do well for themselves. But let's understand something. Less than 22% of African Americans have a college education. So the worldview that these people have is not in line with the supermajority of the black community who's being crushed by the infrastructure that they're trying to enter. So when you see sororities, fraternities, and I'm a member of one of these organizations, trying to push someone like Loretta Lynch, this is a product of the fact that they're looking at the world from their worldview because they're always trying to get into a position where they can enter in and perform. And this is just natural. This is because, part of the culture of these organizations is to teach them that you want to get a good job, you want to have a good career, you want to get a good business, you want to function and excel in this capitalist society without asking the larger question as to how is this capitalist society actually functioning for the super majority of black and brown people who are being crushed by it every day, who are living like people are living in Baltimore, who are living or maybe slightly better because they're working class or they're 2 paychecks away from basically the Baltimore conditions. And the biggest problem I have is that I don't fault those individuals who are looking at the world that way because, the problem I have is that I have a problem with the rest of the black community believing that we should vest the political decisions of black people in this class of individuals, this misleadership class and its acolytes and its, other organizations, whether they be secret societies or otherwise. Because what I'm saying, and this is something that is very controversial in the black community, is that we don't understand that we have a class of individuals who function from a position in which their leadership of our community has not taken us in a good direction. What has it gotten black people in the in the last 45 to 50 years, that we have had 10,000 elected officials to the point where we have a black president, and we are now in a position where we have black men and women being shot down like dogs in the street by cops. We have black child poverty at the highest rate it's been since the civil rights era. Black unemployment is still precipitously high. Historically, black colleges and universities are being gutted left and right. What exactly has this trajectory of having all these black faces in high places done for the black community? What did Eric Holder do for the fact that the Voting Rights Act was gutted? The Fair Housing Act is about to be gutted. It did nothing. So this racial kinship politics, where we depend on this class of people to lead our effects out of this talented mentality that they are the ones that's supposed to represent us, is bankrupt. It's always been bankrupt. It was bankrupt when Du Bois was proposing it. And this again leads to the position that working class people, poor black people who make up the majority of the community, again, as I said, less than 22% of black people have a college education, need to find solutions that are rooted in our class positionality to address the political economy of where, where black people are. What is the economic reality that black people are facing in these urban environments, and how do we find creative ways to address them? Can we depend on the government anymore? Because quite frankly, in the neoliberal age, we talk about neoliberalism is basically market-driven privatization, where under the Obama administration, the government is receding. It's ironic that Obama's talking about the government and jobs from the inner city. I have not seen an urban development plan proposed by the Obama administration in 6 years. You know what I'm saying? Where is the Marshall Plan for the ghetto?
The thing that he said that was so interesting was that he said something to the effect, he seemed to imply that, he's been trying to fix these things and it's sort of the Republicans' fault. And that's very interesting. A lot of people will buy that. But the truth of the matter is Obama is a Republican. Obama is a right of center Republican. Obama, it was Clinton who gave us, mass incarceration, who gutted welfare. And when you want to talk about inequality, when you talk about Obama's trying to push through a trade deal right now, which outsource jobs. But because people don't know, he's going to pass the buck and say, I've been trying to fix this stuff. It's just Republicans.
Well, that's part of the shuck and jive of the politics that we have today. That basically you say, well, it's the other party's fault. You're the leader of the free world. No, why is it that when Ronald Reagan was president, when he was basically governing over a completely Democratic control House and Senate, he was able to pass through some of the most right-wing legislation that he did? Is that because he was just a better leader, or is it because ineffective? Some people say, well, it's racism. The Republicans are just racist. The Republicans are doing what Republicans do. They oppose Democrats. When Clinton was in power, they opposed him too. And what did he do? He cut deals with them that ended up damaging black and brown people and poor people. And what is Obama doing now? He's cutting deals with Republicans that are going to damage black, brown, and poor people, like the TPP, like his attempts in the past to cut Social Security and Medicare. So this is the position. This is more than this about. This is the position of where the Democratic Party is. It's the party of Wall Street. It is abandoned being the party of the working man and the working class and the blue collar union man for over 25 years. That's a sham. Basically, this is a party. And this is something we need to think about with the coming of Hillary now. This is a party that's willing to cut deals with anyone who's trying to basically ingratiate their coffers with money. So I think that, that's something we think about. We talked about a lot of different things. We've digressed a lot here.
Yeah, so, okay. I think you're exactly right. And I think we have digressed. I think we can leave it here. Anybody who wants to reach out to us, you can. Pascal writes at Black Agenda Report. I'm at breakingbrown.com. So I'm sure this isn't the last we're going to hear from the president about the violence and the unrest in Baltimore. And so I'm sure we'll continue this conversation. But for now, Pascal and I'll just leave it right here. Thanks, Pascal, for being on.
Well,